Hello, I'm Father Pat O'Laughlin. I'm the pastor of St. Matthew Parish in Oak Creek and St. Mary by the Lake in Racine. So hello to all my parishioners and other people who might be watching this video. This is the second of three talks on the Triduum that I would like to present to you. My idea being that because many of us will be watching the Triduum on TV either at the cathedral or in a live stream from a parish or whatever, to explain some of the things that you will see so that you have perhaps a better understanding of what's unfolding if you're not familiar with the liturgy, or maybe if you are, maybe I'll touch on something and say, because of the circumstances this year with the coronavirus, this is why this particular ritual part is being omitted from the liturgy. I'm urging people that they would watch Archbishop Ostecki celebrating the Triduum liturgies from the cathedral. The Good Friday liturgy will take place at noon on Friday, April 10th, and it will be shown on live TV on CW18 at noon. So again, channel 18 at noon, you can watch the Good Friday liturgy from the cathedral. But let me tell you just a little bit about what the particular liturgy is about, what we're doing, and what the themes are. Good Friday is the most solemn day in the church year. It is not permitted to celebrate a Mass. It's the only day in the entire church year where Mass cannot be celebrated. Only the sacraments of penance and the anointing of the sick can take place. The dominant theme of the Good Friday liturgy is the mystery of the cross and its place in God's plan of redemption. Again, this great sign of cruelty and suffering, reflecting on how this symbol, this sign, has been transformed into a great and powerful symbol of hope because of Christ's death on the cross. In the church, when the Good Friday liturgy begins, everything is as stark and as bare as can be. The altar is completely uncovered. Ideally, all the crosses in the church have been either removed or have been covered. The purpose of that is that our focus is going to be upon one cross that we'll see in a little bit later. One cross is the focus during the Good Friday liturgy, and therefore the other crosses that are around are covered or removed. The celebration of the Lord's Passion, that's what we call the Good Friday liturgy, has three distinct parts. The first is a liturgy of the Word, which is much like Mass, has a liturgy of the Word. The adoration of the cross is the second part, and Holy Communion is the third part. Now, you might notice that if you watch these liturgies, you might say to yourself, those parts they went from one to the other very abruptly, kind of a choppiness, and I think you'd really be onto something. I've always felt that the usual flow that we feel during a liturgy of one thing to the other is really kind of absent in the Good Friday liturgy. We do the first part, and then we move on to the second part, and then we move on to the third part. The transitions are not elegant, they're not beautiful, they're just stark in the way they are. Now, just as the liturgy for Holy Thursday concluded with the ministers walking out, not in procession, but just basically exiting the scene, so too at the Good Friday liturgy, the ministers simply re-enter, or the ordained ministers re-enter the church and then prostrate themselves in front of the altar while the congregation kneels. It's a great symbol of penance and sorrow. It almost doesn't need to be explained because it's so obvious what it must mean to have people prostrating and kneeling. After that period of kneeling and lying on the floor, the priest stands and goes to the presider's chair, and notice that the invitation, "Let us pray," is omitted on Good Friday before the opening prayer. And I think this is intended to indicate that during the Good Friday liturgy, we only say what is absolutely necessary. And that's really been my own personal philosophy of celebrating the Good Friday liturgy. Is I usually don't preach. I usually don't give any kind of verbal directions about what we're doing or what to do. I give non-verbal but not spoken, because the idea, as I see it, is that the Passion that we read during the liturgy and the gestures that we are doing speak for themselves. There is nothing I'm going to add to that by adding words if I don't have to. So that adds to the starkness, and I think you'll see that if you watch the liturgy. The liturgy of the Word that follows the opening prayer has as its dominant theme the idea of suffering. We're here to reverence the cross of Christ. Suffering has to be right before us. The first reading is from the book of the prophet Isaiah. And many people call the passage that we read the passage about the suffering servant. And again, Isaiah is writing in Old Testament times, but the church has always associated this particular reading with Christ. And if you listen very carefully, the reading's a little bit long, but if you focus on the reading and really listen to it, you will see why the church connects Christ with this particular reading. The second reading is from the letter to the Hebrews, and it has kind of a higher language and presents Jesus as our high priest, yet a high priest who suffered during his earthly life. And it makes the very important point, in some complicated words and ideas, that the death of Jesus has a saving character, that his death accomplished our salvation and is therefore extremely important. The gospel reading that follows is the Passion according to St. John, which I hope you are familiar with. Just a thought, if you're watching this at home, watching it on TV or streaming it, consider standing during the Passion, which is what we would traditionally do if we were in the church. And then at the passage where Christ dies, if you would kneel. Whatever ministers you're watching will be standing for this gospel and will be kneeling at the time of Jesus and then standing at the end. You might consider doing that as a way of additionally kind of participating with your body as you hear the Passion. After the Passion is read, and perhaps a homily, again there's an option for the presider to preach if they would like to, a collection is taken, and it's a very specific collection. The collection on Good Friday is always taken to support the holy places and the shrines that are maintained by the Franciscan order in the Holy Land. There are many Christian places in the Holy Land. There are not a lot of Christians in the Holy Land. So a group of Franciscans does their best to maintain these sites and holy places, and they do so with the revenue that's raised throughout the world in the collection on Good Friday. The absence of these funds this year could be disastrous, so please, if you want, consider donating to the upkeep of these shrines by using the Good Friday envelope that you'll find in your packet of envelopes from whatever parish you belong to. Parishes do not keep this collection. It goes to the support of the Holy Land. So after the collection is taken, then follows the most solemn and formal petitions of the entire year. The petitions do not have a direct relationship to Good Friday, but they are a way on this very solemn day of asking that God would fulfill all these different prayers as the fruit of the redemption that Christ won for us. Now, there are usually 10 petitions that are done on Good Friday. This year there are going to be 11 because by direction of the Pope, churches throughout the world are going to add an 11th petition for those suffering from the coronavirus. The petitions are absolutely written to be sung. And whatever you watch, you will see these petitions and hear these petitions being sung. The format is usually that one minister introduces what it is that we're going to pray for, world leaders, for example. Then after a period of prayer where we all pray for that, another minister collects all those private prayers that we've had, if we've been praying for it, and sings his own particular prayer, bringing all those prayers to conclusion. The prayers that we hear on Good Friday for Christian unity, for the Jewish people, and for unbelievers have all been rewritten since the Second Vatican Council. Before that time, before 1965, these petitions were distinctly unchristian. They did not speak about the Jewish people and unbelievers and Christians who were not Catholic in a very kind way. Happily, those petitions have been rewritten. Now, after the intercessions, we come to the absolute central action of Good Friday, which is the adoration of the Holy Cross. It used to be called the Veneration of the Cross, but when this book, this Roman Missal, was revised, it's now called the Adoration of the Cross. Usually, Catholics proclaim the death of the Lord in a gathering by celebrating Mass. On Good Friday, this is the only occasion during the year when we proclaim the death of the Lord by adoring the cross. The first part of this liturgy, again, this is the second part of the three parts, is called the showing of the cross. And it can happen in one of two ways, and I'm not sure what the Archbishop is going to do or what individual priests at their parishes are going to do. One of the formats can be that the priest or another minister holds the cross with the corpus on it, but it's covered by a purple veil. And then before acclaiming the wood of the cross 3 times, part of the cross is unveiled, like an arm will be unveiled, then an arm, then the whole veil will be taken off. That's one way that it can be done. Other parishes literally bring the cross into the church. At St. Matthew, that's the tradition, that a minister will bring the cross, which has been outside the church, into the entrance of the church, hold it up, and then sing, "Behold the wood of the cross," to which the people respond. Then the person moves with the cross to the center aisle, and the acclamation follows. Then the minister brings the cross up into the sanctuary to a high place, holds it up, and there is the third acclamation. When that is done, then the whole congregation is invited to come forward to show their reverence to the cross, which can be done by kissing, can be done by kneeling, touching it, any different way really that people feel comfortable doing. This year, this central action of adoring the cross is going to be very abbreviated in whatever parish it is celebrated. For one, there will be only a handful of people at the liturgy, and the priest who's going to adore the cross first is permitted to kiss the cross, but no one else in attendance is allowed this year to kiss the cross in adoration. That's one of the things that is going to be different about this year. After the adoration of the cross, we move into the third part of the liturgy, which is Holy Communion. The minister goes to the tabernacle, brings the hosts that were consecrated on Holy Thursday out, and communion is distributed. After communion, the hosts are very simply taken back to the tabernacle, and the priest prays the prayer after communion and offers a solemn blessing to the people who are there, and then the ministers depart in silence, much as they departed in silence on Holy Thursday. Again, the liturgy concludes in a very stark and abrupt manner, and that is very, very intentional. Let me add just a few words about Holy Saturday. It's interesting to me that the Church has never organized a celebration that is specifically aimed at honoring the stay of Christ in the tomb, which is where Christ was on Holy Saturday. Let me read from the Roman Missal what the Church has to say about Holy Saturday. It's just one sentence. On Holy Saturday, the Church waits at the Lord's tomb in prayer and fasting, meditating on his passion and death, and on his descent into hell, and awaiting his resurrection. Now, the tradition is that on Holy Saturday, Christ descended to the realm of the dead. The realm of the dead is what the Church means by hell. That's very confusing. I don't have time to really go into any depth there. Christ did not go to a place of suffering. He went to the place of the dead, as it was at that time. So he descended to the dead, and the tradition is that he preached salvation to Adam and to the patriarchs and to other holy people who were worthy of salvation, but a salvation that had not yet been won by the resurrection and the ascension of Christ. So he goes to the underworld, preaches salvation to them. That's what Holy Saturday is about. So Holy Saturday very much has this theme of waiting. Again, the Church invites us to think about it, waiting at the tomb, waiting for something to happen, which we all, of course, know is going to be Christ's resurrection from the dead. So Good Friday is a stark liturgy. It's probably oldest of all the Triduum liturgies. It is definitely something worth taking part in. And again, if you'd like to join the Archbishop at the Cathedral as he prays the Liturgy of Good Friday, it takes place at noon this Friday, and you can watch it on CW18 on regular television.